This morning I'd like to show you my setup that I'm currently working with in my car for APRS. Below you see I have an FTM-400DR. I've done several videos related to APRS and using that radio. And above you have a Windows tablet from a manufacturer called Winbook. It's a house brand for an electronics store called Micro Center. There are several of these across the United States. Fortunately, there's not one near me. I ordered this one over the internet. It is the cheapest Windows tablet I've ever found. It is $69 new, but if you live in a town that has one of these Micro Centers, you can get them as an open box deal for as low as $38. You can see what the inventory of those open box deals is online. Unfortunately, you cannot order them online. Now, here's what's interesting about this setup. So below you see occasionally the Yaesu is receiving packets. There's another one. And you see the direction and the distance to that particular station. However, you don't see where that station is on a map relative to you. And that's something I really miss. That's something I had in my old APRS setup. While this is a nice radio, that is definitely a feature that's lacking. I recently figured out that if you're using the data cable that comes with the radio, you can connect it through the USB port on any Windows machine, in this case a Windows tablet, and then using a program like APRS-IS 32, which is one of my favorite Windows programs for APRS, you can actually take those packets that are being received by the radio down there, and as soon as they flash on that screen, you'll also see them pop up on this screen up here, superimposed on this offline street map. Now, in addition to that, there's a little bit of added functionality with this particular setup. I've added an internet connection with the very inexpensive Freedom Pop U600. I actually got this device for $4.99 new from the company. I had been looking at some of their wireless options on their website, freedompop.com, and didn't end up buying anything on that particular occasion. They sent me an email later that day saying that this was on sale, $4.99. The data plan is free for the first 500 megabytes every month. I was already using Freedom Pop for another APRS setup that I had, and this seemed like a no-brainer. Now, added bonus, something I did not anticipate. You notice on the bottom of the screen all the green and red boxes. Those are GPS satellites. This particular device, the U600, actually has a GPS built into it, and I figured out how to set it up so that that information would be passed on to the Windows tablet. So I'm able to follow myself on the screen, so I don't have to, obviously when I'm driving, I don't want to actually be touching the screen or have anything to do with it other than to glance down at it occasionally to see if there's anyone in the area with whom I can communicate. Now, obviously, it's nice to have all the RF information show up on the screen, but because I've also got the internet connection wherever I go, pretty much, I can also see what's beyond the horizon. On this particular morning, it's interesting information. I see the convoy of vehicles that are coming down I-65 on their way to the Huntsville Hamfest. Unfortunately, I have to work this morning. I'm sitting in the parking lot about to go in, but you can see all the people that are headed to Huntsville this morning on 65. Now, some of those stations I'm able to pick up at my location, mostly because of this massive digipeater right here, N4HAP-1. So some of them are actually showing up through the FTM-400. Those stations that are not are going to come in through the internet. So, N4CCB, where's he at? Yeah, there he is. See what I mean?
Now I'm going to show you how to put together the setup that you've just seen. First thing you need to do is procure a Windows tablet. The one featured in the video was $69.99. However, you can sometimes save a lot of money on open box versions of this tablet. Whatever you go with, make sure it has a full-blown Windows operating system. Not Windows RT, it's got to be something like Windows 8.1 or 10. If you haven't already, install the drivers for your data cable. Once they're installed, go ahead and plug them in. Power on your radio. Enter the setup menu by holding the display setup button. This will bring up the setup menu screen that you see here. Tap on Data. There are two settings that we have to set under the Data menu. The first one is going to be found under COM port setting. Click on Output and change the output to packet. Then go back and select Data Speed. Change the data speed to 9600 baud. In most parts of the country, APRS speed needs to be 1200 baud. To get back to the VFO screen, hold the Display Setup button. Next, you need to install an APRS program onto your tablet. The one that I've featured in this video is APRS-IS 32. Once the program is installed onto the tablet, you need to go to Configure, Ports, New. Then from the drop-down menu, select FTM-400. I know that's not the name of the radio we're using in this video, but the way that radio, the 350 and the 400, communicate with the APRS-IS 32 hasn't changed. Give the radio a name. In this case, we're going to call it what it is, FTM-400DR. Hit Create. Then tell the system how you're connecting to that radio. In this case, we're going to go through the COM port. Select the COM port that's represented by the USB data cable. If you don't know what this is, which is more than likely, go into the Device Manager for Windows, and under USB Devices, look for an entry that says Prolific. Prolific is the name of the chipset that the SCU20 data cable is using to communicate with the computer. In my case, COM port 12 is in use. Now keep in mind, if you have more than one USB port available, either because of the tablet you bought or because of a hub that you're using, if you change which port you're plugged into, it's very likely that Windows will reassign the COM port that the data cable is using. So it's possible you'll break your configuration, have to go in here and change it again. But for now, we're going to put, in my case, COM port 12 and then the data rate of 9600 baud. The other defaults are fine: parity none, data 8, and stop bit 1. After that, you need to enable the settings that you want for your tablet. In this case, you can see I've checked several things. Some of them are kind of moot points, like for example, IS to RF. What that means is the program wants to know if it receives something over the internet that needs to be sent on the RF side or on the radio side. Is the program authorized to do that? Well, it doesn't really matter what you select here, because on this particular setup, you can't actually push data from the tablet through the data cable to the radio for the radio to send on behalf of the tablet. You can do the opposite. That's what we're doing in this video. Anything that we're receiving from the radio is being displayed on the tablet. You just can't go the other way. When you're done with the selections that you want, hit Accept. Now mapping should be enabled. Confirm this by clicking on Enables, Ports, and then make sure there's a check mark next to the name that you gave to your device. If you're driving down the road with this particular device in tow and you don't want to use a data plan to populate the maps, you're going to have to take a couple extra steps to go ahead and cache those maps. APRS-IS 32 refers to this as prefetching map tiles. Three things you got to do here. First, go to Screen, Map, and Prefetch. Whatever you're looking at on the screen will now be downloaded or cached to your tablet. Not only what you're seeing at that particular moment, but everything up to 2 levels down. Don't move the screen around while this is taking place. The downloading can take a while, and you want to make sure that you're on a good connection at the time, preferably a home Wi-Fi connection, and not something that's metered like a data plan on a cell phone. The progress of the download is being indicated by the yellow circle you see on the screen. The yellow circle will start out small around the crosshairs and it will extend out to the edges of your screen. This is the progress of the download that's taking place. When you leave your internet connection and you've downloaded all the map tiles that you think you're going to need, you need to turn off the enable for OSM fetch. OSM being offline street maps. You're basically telling the tablet at this point not to try to find an internet connection to try and download additional map tiles. This could be problematic if you're on a metered data plan for a cell phone. You don't want it to go and try and download a lot of new map tiles, especially if you have all the ones you think you're going to need. And then the last thing you need to do is make sure that the program does not purge any of the old map tiles. Go to Configure, Map, Tile Sets, Original, and uncheck the Purge Enabled box. Don't forget a mount. In this particular case, you see the one I'm using from Amazon. Sometimes you can get these used. I found one for $23. The arm on this is all metal, which is good, offers some stability. The rest of the device is plastic, and it seems to be working out okay. There are a few limitations. We talked about the major one. This is a unidirectional communication path. The radio will transmit data down the cable to the tablet, but the tablet will not transmit data to the radio. Or more precisely, the radio will not receive anything that the tablet tries to transmit to or through the radio. Now, if you want to add IGate functionality, there are a couple ways that you can do this easily and inexpensively. The first one is you can tether your tablet to your cell phone's data plan. This could be through a physical tethering, like a USB cable, or you could set up your phone to be a Wi-Fi hotspot, or even a Bluetooth hotspot. And then of course there are dedicated devices that are Wi-Fi hotspots that you can get through your cellular provider. Now if you don't want to go either of these routes, there is another cheaper option, and this was alluded to at the beginning of the video, both my demonstration and the beginning of the slideshow. There is a company called Freedom Pop that has a very affordable data plan that you could use for this particular setup. I have the Franklin Wireless U600 pictured here. As I mentioned earlier in the video, I actually got this on sale new for $4.99 from the company, freedompop.com. There is an activation fee with any of the devices that you either buy from the company or even ones that you provide in a bring your own device scenario. These devices come with 500 megabytes free a month, and when you consider the fact that most APRS usage, even for a long commute over the course of a month, can still easily be under 500 megabytes a month, you're well within the limits of such a plan. Now, if you are using something like the U600 plugged into the tablet, you're now going to need a USB hub, at least if you're using the Micro Center tablet that I have shown you in this video, the WinBook. It only has one USB port. You're going to need one to connect to the radio, and you're going to need one for the data device, unless it's a wireless device and not the one that I showed here. This hub, not getting any kickbacks from Amazon on this, I'm just showing you what I was using in the video. It is possible to run both the devices that I've shown you up to this point through an unpowered USB hub like the one featured here. Now, let's say you have an old Sprint smartphone, or you know somebody who does. If you're going to use Freedom Pop, keep in mind Freedom Pop is a reseller of data on the Sprint network. Therefore, if you have a Sprint phone, it's very likely that you'll be able to bring this phone to the Freedom Pop network, and this will keep you from having to buy any additional hardware. You still have to pay the $19 for an activation fee to set up the phone with Freedom Pop as your service provider, but the data is all coming through the Sprint network. To figure out if the device you have or a device you're looking to get is compatible with Freedom Pop, you need to check their Bring Your Own Device program page, which is listed here. Also keep in mind that most phones are going to be locked so that you cannot tether without providing your service provider a monthly fee. In the case of Freedom Pop, that's $3.99 a month. If you don't want to pay this fee, you either need to find an unlocked device, or you need to root or jailbreak the phone, depending on if it's an Apple or Android device. Here are some of the pros and cons of bringing your own phone device. Pros: no additional hardware to buy. It's very easy to set up a data limit on a smartphone as compared to some of the Wi-Fi devices that you see out there. This can be important to you if you're trying to stay under that 500 megabyte a month limit. And then the other thing, if you're using a phone, like I mentioned before, you're not only getting data in the plan, there's also voice and text messaging that's included, up to a certain amount free every month. So this could also serve as a backup phone to you. It could also be your primary phone if you're looking to save money. You don't use cell phones that often. Cons: it's one more device you got to turn on and off each time you get in and out of the car, unless you just have a massive battery for it. And more than likely, you're going to have to root the phone unless you buy a phone that's unlocked already. All right, now let's talk about the benefits of having an iGate. We're not talking about the benefits of using bring your own device anymore. This is just straight up, why should I have an iGate in my car? Because it is a very unusual thing. In this day and age, most iGates are stationary. Well, a couple advantages, couple benefits. One, you're really helping out the APRS network by filling in holes as you drive around, and you're getting other packets into the network. Two, you're able to see objects that are very likely outside of your RF range. This can be advantageous if you have a long commute or you're driving somewhere. If you're going into a town that subscribes to the Local Information Initiative, they're going to be displaying information about their repeaters in terms of frequencies and tones. Now, if they're following standard guidelines for broadcasting of stationary information, they're only going to broadcast or beacon that information once every 30 minutes. If you miss this beacon as you drive into town, you may not see it again before you've passed through. If you're getting the IS side, you more than likely pulled down that packet well before you got an RF range of that particular town. And then the other thing that's nice about having an iGate in your vehicle is that you quickly learn what the dead spots are in your area. You glance down at your screen, and if you see that the SSID that's assigned to your radio, say -9, is showing you as being 20 or 30 miles behind where you're actually at, you know that that -9 packet isn't getting to the iGate, and that could be because there's poor coverage in that area, there's congestion in the area that prevented your packet from reaching the iGate, or potentially you have a problem with your radio. Now, if you do buy the Winbook TW700, there are a couple tips for using it. Fair warning. It's an excellent price, but there's some limitations. The 700 lacks hard drive space. It's listed as having 16 gigabytes. However, roughly half of that is being used by the operating system right out the gate. And then after that, if you download any Windows updates, you can very quickly fill the available hard drive space. Now, a couple ways you can get around this. One, if you're going to be offline with this tablet, or you're going to be online as an iGate, but that's all you're going to be doing, you may want to assume the risk of turning off the Windows update, or at least only downloading those updates that are absolutely critical. One of the downsides to using a tablet this particular size with a full-blown operating system, in other words, not something designed necessarily to work on a tablet, is some of the apps can be extremely hard to navigate with normal size fingers. A couple ways you can get around this. You could get a stylus, you could get a keyboard, which isn't terribly practical in a vehicle, would work for a base station. You can plug in, if you're at a base station, you can use the HDMI output and plug into a bigger screen, which would make things a little bit easier. Or probably the best solution for being in a car is go to the display settings and increase the screen size to 150%. This will increase the size of the text and the things that you have to click occasionally as you navigate through apps. The downside of doing this is some apps don't scale well when you change the display settings. For example, Ham Radio Deluxe. Some of the screens will actually not fit. Some of the Ham Radio Deluxe screens will not fit on the screen if you zoom the screen, and it can make it hard to hit buttons on the screen when they're not actually being displayed, like OK or add or cancel, those sort of things. As I mentioned before, you can run other programs because it is a full-blown Windows device, even though you're a little bit stretched for RAM. If you want to do anything beyond really basic functions, like for Ham Radio Deluxe, I can do digital modes okay. Sometimes it stutters. I can even run the logbook simultaneously, but anything beyond that, you're going to need a little more RAM, and you're definitely going to need more hard drive space. so you may want to look at a slightly larger tablet if you think you might go anything beyond APRS. And then another thing I want to note about this tablet, just fair warning about it, is I have a lot of trouble with the power button on it. I don't know if it's just the one I got or if it's all of them. But basically, if you're used to using a tablet, you can usually hit the power button once, just tap it, and the screen will go dark, and it will go on a certain form of standby. Click it again, and it comes back on very quickly. That's not so much the case with the Winbook TW700, at least not the one I have. Sometimes when I click the button, I can see the backlight turn on, but Windows doesn't actually wake up. I click it other times and it will turn on completely. It's kind of hit or miss. Again, I don't know if that's a problem just with my tablet or all of these tablets. It has not prevented it from being useful for things like this APRS project or as a dedicated platform for using digital modes or logbook or even computer control of my other Yaesu, the 857. But if you are planning on turning it on and off a lot, this is going to get on your nerves very quickly. The way I get around this is I just leave the settings, the power settings on the tablet to always be on. If I boot the tablet, I don't want the screen to go black. It's going to mess it up. So if you're doing anything else with it, you may want to look at a different tablet. Now, as I get close to closing, I want to show you one of the other advantages visually of having an IGate. And that's a side-by-side comparison of what you can get on the RF side versus what you can get on the RF side plus what you get on the IS side. So here is a drive on a random day just south of Chattanooga in North Georgia. This is what I was receiving through the 400, and this is what I at the same moment had received through the IS side. The combination of two can definitely add some value to your APRS setup. Closing acknowledgments. Of course, if you know anything about APRS, you know it is a registered trademark of Bob Runinga. And also, I've talked about and shown extensively APRS-IS CE32. So, of course, want to thank Lynn Deffenbaugh, KJ4ERJ, for creating this program and sustaining this program.